Behold, my Impulse record collection. Impulse is, of course, a storied label that has become more expensive and sought after in recent years, especially originals. So if you're at a record store and you see an Impulse record like this, and it has the orange and black label, it's going to cost a lot of money, right? But one of the things I've learned through the years, as I've sought out Impulse titles, is these are great. If you can find these red ring ABC labels, they oftentimes feature the same metalwork as originals. They've got these great jackets still, and I think the quality is pretty much on par. But the difference is they're oftentimes half the price. So if you can stomach a label that doesn't look as cool, I definitely recommend these. And in the spirit of Impulse, I also wanted to share this. This is Shelly Mann's 234. This is somewhat of an underrated album on Impulse that you can find even as original for under 30 bucks. And it's interesting because a lot of the players on this album come from different jazz heritages, right? So you have Shelly Mann, who's really West Coast. You have Hank Jones, who I think of as more of a straight-ahead bop player. And of course you have Coleman Hawkins, who cut his teeth in the swing era. This is probably one of my favorite albums on Impulse. This is a later record that he put out in his career. And if I may be so bold, one of my favorite jazz records of all time. So I definitely encourage you to seek this one out. But look, if you want to stick around, I also have some other really great jazz records to share today. All the records I'm going to show, you can find in record stores and online pretty inexpensively. I do these videos from time to time, so if you like jazz records from labels like Impulse or Blue Note, CTI, Muse, Groove Merchant, Prestige, all the rest, stick around. I've got some good ones to share, and subscribe to help grow my moderately entertaining and informative channel. All right, let's check out some records. So these covers are pretty recognizable and associated with Mainstream's 600 series, which features a lot of great records, if not inconsistently so. But this is Smokin by Curtis Fuller, whose records I keep buying. Funky, leaning into hard bop, Billy Higgins, Mickey Bass, great players on this. For 15 to 20 bucks, absolutely worth picking up, so check it out. Leon Thomas, just one of those one-of-a-kind artists that you can find pretty inexpensively on the Flying Dutchman label. This record is really notable for sprawling tracks like in Pharaoh's Tune, sort of spiritual, lyrical journeys that combine Thomas's distinct yodeling scat singing technique, I don't know what to call it, with the brilliant musicianship of artists like Roy Haynes and Billy Cobham on drums. Just great album. If you can find it for 15 bucks, check it out. Cat's out of the bag on this one, Les McCain's Layers. I think a lot of record collectors these days have come to recognize this album for its pioneering nature in use of funky synthesizers. So hardly an unknown at this point, and harder to find lying around record stores. But for the uninitiated, very famous album. It's kind of like this. Bridges by Gil Scott-Heron and Brian Jackson. This is another trailblazing effort that uses synth sounds and grooves that would become more common in the hip-hop community. This was released in '78, but this was released as early as 1972, right? So it really speaks to how ahead of its time this album was. Anyway, stone cold classic, a classic DJ record, and probably more of an eBay hunter these days. I think you can still find it for 20 to 25 bucks, and you should, because it's liable to get quite expensive. Awesome post-bop record on Inner City. This was recorded in '65 and impressively composed by Prince Lasha. Of course, Herbie Hancock is on this and takes everything to this completely transcendent plane, right? Having just come off this Maiden Voyage. It's hard to put into words Hancock's gravity as a player at this point. I mean, he's just sort of otherworldly, and it's reflected in this record for sure. But Prince Lasha is really known as a free jazz guy, and I'm admittedly not that familiar with his discography, which is somewhat limited compared to many of his peers. This is, however, an earlier LP in his career, so the result is a little more melodic with just some freer moments. So an accessible outing and just outstanding in my opinion. Not really cheap though. I got this for 25 bucks, but I think you can expect to find it more for 35 or 40. You know, a sandwich these days is $20. So what are you going to do? You might as well spend it on jazz records. Easy to find funk album from Atlanta-based album Brick. Funky disco dusted grooves on this, with heaters like Daz and Southern Sunset. I mean, it can get a little smooth, but certainly forgivable for those of us who like to get the funk out. Anyway, great party album, and you can, like I said, find this easily for $10 or less. Check it out. The Bobby Timmons Trio in person. This is a Riverside release. Then you can actually find somewhat more affordably. Timmons, of course, has been sort of historically underrated, even dismissed maybe, because his playing was really rooted more in soul. So I think he was sort of accused of not being as pioneering as some of his peers, and the prices of his albums sort of reflect that. But he was a brilliant player and a brilliant songwriter. This album has one of my favorite tracks of his called Dat Dare, which came from this. This is probably my favorite Bobby Timmons record, and this is one, if you prowl eBay, you can get between 30 to 40 bucks, and it's definitely worth finding. But yeah, great record. This got Ron Carter on it, and who else is on this? Ron Carter and Albert Heath. No brainer. If you see it and it's cheap, pick it up. This is a certified classic by Billy Cobham, and probably his best known work on Atlantic. Funky fusion, rock jazz fusion. At times, this album is like if jazz and Van Halen had a baby. It's the work of a madman, an odyssey from start to finish, and I think this is required listening if you really like rock jazz fusion, right? But do yourself a favor. Don't spend $30 on this. I see this priced up in record stores all the time, and then you can go to the next shop over and it's $8, right? This sold well. It's on a big label. Copies of this are literally everywhere. So do yourself a favor, be patient and find a cheap copy and pick it up. So there are a lot of Joe Pass records out there, but I'm always sort of gravitate to this one on Pablo. This is Joe Pass, Portraits of Duke Ellington. So he's doing all Ellington standards here, of course, in a trio format, guitar, bass, drums. Pass is one of the great masters at guitar, jazz or otherwise. This is another popular release of his. This is a for Django. This can be found cheaply in sort of 70s reissues format, but it's also been released as a tone poet. And in any format, I'd sort of encourage picking this up because this is great. But this record on Pablo, like all Pablo records, is really not that expensive. Think $10. And it's, again, great record. Check it out. Jimmy Smith, Open House. This album was released in '68, so it's going to be found on the Liberty Blue Note label. But it was actually recorded in 1960 at Englewood Cliff Studio. Jackie McClean, I Quebec, Blue, Mitchell, Donald Bailey, Quentin Warren. You're not going to find this lineup for 15 to 20 bucks anywhere else. And if it's Jimmy Smith on Blue Note, why not go for it, right? Can't say the same about those Verve releases. Check this out. So as long as we're on the subject of Impulse, I wanted to share one more tip. I have 2 copies here of Sonny Rollins on Impulse, and while both might appear to be originals, one is in fact not genuine. If you look at the label of this, despite the fact that it is a seemingly black and orange label, you will see under the 33 and a third RPM, it says manufactured by Capitol. So there was some sort of deal with Impulse and Capitol to license some of their releases. I don't know if it was for a record club or something of that nature, but if you're not careful, you might think you have an original that was done by Impulse and their engineers. Really, you have something that was done by Capitol and their engineers, which aren't really known for jazz. So I think it's something to look out for if you're buying orange and black labels, because it's really, really easy to miss. There's a reason why I have 2 of these, right? I was at one point fooled. Anyway, that's it for me, folks. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.